Camille, you underwent a gender transition recently. Can you tell us what made you feel like this was the right thing to do?
Part of it was that I struggled with some childhood trauma. Um, my best friend had been raped by her brother when I was in sixth grade, and I know for me it was just being afraid of, being vulnerable and wanting to protect myself,
Right.
and also my dad telling me about how men his age talk sexually about girls my age, um, and then I just started to identify with the male characters and anime manga I was reading, and um, just trying to reject my female identity, dressing more masculine, trying to hide my breasts and my hips so that men wouldn't see.
Right.
And
Partially because of these stories your father had told you about
yeah.
the sexually aggressive way that men would behave sometimes.
It was more of like just how they talked sexually,
Yeah.
and and I was wearing like feminine things at the time that he had told me this, and then it was just sort of this realization of like, oh, like you can be vulnerable, and you can also get blamed for it too.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, and so that was what started me on that. And then in college, I heard this idea that you could be non-binary, and I'd struggled with years with I was, well, in general, I was just struggling mentally. Like I was struggling with depression. I had generalized anxiety disorder, and then I was still dressing more masculine. I was dressing a little bit more androgynous at this point, but still rejecting that and wanting to protect myself. And yeah, so I ended up starting to think about that. And then it was when I was 26 that I saw a gender affirming therapist. And then I started to believe I was non binary. And then I got surgery when I was 30. And at that point, I'd done 20 years of therapy, and I had done 2 rounds of transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy. So I had done everything for my mental health that was available in the conventional field. And I was just really struggling. But the sad thing is that and the crazy thing is that they transitioned me to a non-binary sex, one that doesn't exist in nature. So you can't look at the human species and be like, this is what you want to transition to. I didn't know what I wanted. Really, I wanted my breasts gone, or like to disappear, but I also didn't want the masculine shape of like a man's chest. So it's like I wasn't quite sure. I was just like, I just had discomfort with my breast. And then
So you're trying to get away from both the idea of a female body and a male body.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be myself.
Right.
And so I think that that's kind of this freeing idea with being non-binary for many people, is like, well, I can just be me and I'm not sexualized or whatnot.
Where does that idea come from? Who's giving you that idea?
The non-binary idea, it's interesting because I learned it in women's studies classes. So really, I mean, the women's studies, the gender ideology really co-opted it. And so they were talking about trans people, and then there was this idea of, well, you can be a third sex, you can be outside of the binary, you can be, gender fluid. It's surreal because it's just like there's all these different things, and there's no consistency there. It's not like, well, we can say for sure that this is what's going on. And I think too, there is this kind of mental health or mental illness component, really. And we don't know, because I was disconnected from my body since I was 18, just with dealing with trauma.
Right.
And so it's just like, well, how much of that is, well, yeah, I don't really feel like feminine or anything, or like a woman, because I'm disconnected from my body.
Right.
So that's like something that's not even really part of the discussion that much as well.
And how much would you say, like, when you decided, okay, I'm going to start undergoing this attempted sex change?
Yeah.
When you started going down that path, what role were doctors and therapists playing in telling you, yes, you should do this?
I mean, everyone affirmed it. I reached out to a doctor at my local clinic, and he set me up with somebody, and she reached out and connected me with the individuals. 2 mental health professionals signed off on the letters. There wasn't pushback there. There wasn't pushback from my surgeon, and I was actually surprised to find out that because I asked for the surgery and such, and then I thought that was just one letter, and I found out, like, I got this call and says, oh no, you need a letter saying you're psychologically fit to do the surgery. Well, I didn't realize that this wasn't normal. Like, most patients just get one letter. So I was probably giving off, because I was struggling with mental illness. Like, the surgeon knew about my CPTSD, and she knew about my other mental health issues. Like, she probably was getting some bad vibes, or not bad vibes, but just like red flags.
Was concerned, isn't thinking maybe I shouldn't do a double mastectomy on this healthy girl.
Right. And yet and so to cover themselves, I imagine that's why they needed a second letter. But yeah, that's not usual in Oregon.
And with these therapists, do you think they should have been concerned about giving you these recommendations?
They should have been, but the reality is that the ideology says that you can be trans and have trauma. So they're not accounting for the people who are transitioning because of trauma. Right. So it's sad, because it's just like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. And when you say everyone was affirming you, I think some of our listeners don't always know what that means. Yeah. So, and I think it's important to talk about this because it's such a huge role. Right. This plays such a huge role in so many detransitioner stories. What is this affirmation that you get from social media and from the medical community when you decide that you want to transition?
I think the big part of affirmation or affirming a patient is really, it's kind of going off of like their lived experiences, and then just saying like, oh, well, that must be true then. You must be trans, or you must be non-binary, rather than taking like a critical look at it and saying like, well, you have a history of trauma. The things like, I knew I had the history of trauma. I actually told I told the gender therapist about what had happened to my friend, and yet they still wanted to go through with it. So, or not wanted to go through with it, but they didn't push back at all.
Right.
At all, yeah.
Now, and then you did ultimately go through with this double mastectomy. Yeah. When did you realize that you had made a mistake?
So, it's kind of weird for me, because I dealt with all these physical health issues after the surgery. Doctors took me seriously at first, but then became dismissive once they thought it was psychosomatic fever. So I'm like, okay, the doctors can't help me. Right. I'm going to work with a naturopath, and I'm going to, I saw Michaela Pearson, saw that she was eating meat, and I was like, wow, she's really emotionally stable. Like, I'm going to try and add meat back into my diet, because previously I'd been pescatarian for about probably a decade. Wow. And so I was the only form of meat was fish, and I wasn't getting enough of it. Yeah. So started adding meat back into my diet, did some other holistic treatments, and then I was shocked when all of a sudden, like, I was like, wow, my mental health is getting better. And I was actually still having the health issues from the surgery, but my mental health was getting better. I'm like, oh, this was it. Like, all I needed to do was address my physical health, but nobody was doing that, because they're like, oh, well, you're depressed. Let's give you an antidepressant, or let's give you a stimulant for your ADHD. Like, nobody was looking at any potential underlying issues, because they pegged me for somebody just dealing with mental illness.
And something so simple as adding like more protein or more meat.
Right.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And when you started telling the doctors, okay, I think I made a mistake, or did you tell the doctors, that I regret this transition? What did they say to you?
Well, I didn't talk to the doctors about it, and part of it was because, with my surgeon, I'm still remembering how she treated me once I dealt with all these physical health issues, and she's like, oh no, the surgery couldn't have caused that. And so I was like, I just don't feel comfortable reaching out to her again, because I just like, and then it's just, it's surreal, because the first time a doctor, like, I went to a neurosurgeon, or not a neurosurgeon, but like a neurologist. Okay. And I remember I was like, okay, what happens if like this issue still persists? And he's like, it's not going to persist. And he was treating me like I was wasting his time. And I was just like, I just don't feel comfortable reaching out to these doctors. And I think a lot of detransitioners have those feelings of like, we've been dismissed, or, especially like if you tell a doctor that you've detransitioned, and then they're sort of like, well, can we trust you with other things? Or it's that. And then I know many detransitioners also have the issue of being told that this is part of their gender journey. Yes. And I've been told that too.
You've been told that. So you go in and you say to a doctor, you're vulnerable with them about this path that you've been on and all these things that are probably hard for you to talk about. And they say, actually, all of these things that you've suffered are just part of your gender journey?
I haven't had a doctor say that to me, but I've had therapists say that to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
It's not good. I mean, it's not a good feeling. Thankfully, when I did hear that, I was in a better place mentally to handle that. But, especially when somebody's like really, like they've just detransitioned and they're struggling with it mentally, like that would be devastating.
I'm sure. So now you're doing really amazing work to help other people who've been through what you've been through to find more resources. Tell us a little bit about your organization.
Yeah, so I'm president of Detrans Help, which is a nonprofit organization by detransitioners for detransitioners. Wow. And we focus in on providing resources for detransitioners and those who care about us, parents, concerned citizens. We're working on a self-advocacy guide so that detransitioners can navigate the medical system. Mm-hmm. This is something that I wish I had had. So this is something that's really important to have out there. Right. And we're also hoping to get more resources to detransitioners because that's something that's really needed in this space. Is not just like we're seeing like a lot of great work with therapists and detransitioners getting access to therapy, but we're not really and also the legal that detransitioners lawsuits. Yeah. There's more lawsuits coming out and more lawyers are stepping forward, and there's great resources like Transition Justice that are connecting with detransitioners with lawyers. Themis is a new organization, and I believe that they connect detransitioners as well. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing these particular needs being addressed, but we're still seeing like medical needs need to be addressed for detransitioners. Mm-hmm. Things just like, a lot of detransitioners are on Medicaid. So like getting medical help or getting jobs, like there's even like things like that which detransitioners really need. So
wow. Well, I would love to ask you, Camille, as the last question, if you could mm-hmm. speak to a room full of doctors and therapists right now, what would you say to them? Doctors and therapists who are considering being part of these so-called gender-affirming surgeries and interventions, what would you say to them?
I would ask them to look at any underlying health issues first, like even doing something like a CRP test or, checking for inflammation in the body, making sure that no one who is struggling with severe mental illness should do any of these surgeries. They need to get their mental health under control. And that trauma is, we are seeing this in the population, particularly with women who have histories of sexual trauma. They are the ones who are, there's a lot of them who are transitioning to, I think it's partially escapism and also to protect themselves. Right. And then we're also seeing gay and lesbian individuals who are transitioning because they'd rather be straight. And so it's just a lot of, particularly escapism is a particular issue. And we also don't know the long-term effects of HRT. And mm-hmm. also particularly we're seeing a lot of nerve pain with detransitioners as well. So we don't know why this is.
So it sounds like we need more medical professionals that want to help detransitioners.
We do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Camille. We're so grateful that you were able to sit down with us today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.